Well, so to set the scene for our discussions today, I'm delighted to be joined by colleagues from around Europe. We wanted to give you a flavour of the problems that are top of mind for politicians in our different capitals in Europe. So I'm joined by Frank Hersey from London, Oceane Herrero from Paris, Larissa Kirgel from Berlin, and Peter Hack from Brussels. Frank, I wanted to start with you. Obviously, there's been a lot of conversation around AI here in Brussels, but when it comes to artificial intelligence, what is currently top of mind for policymakers in London?
I think getting through the elections on Thursday, it just seems we've got the local elections coming up, and I mention it because it seems to have overtaken the entire conversation. So if you speak to tech policymakers, they want to talk about AI and how it's the future for the UK. Talk to anybody else and they don't understand why we'd even be talking about it. We just have to get through the election. So I suppose we've got some potential legislation for AI coming the following week when Parliament comes back in the King's speech. So really with policy making at the moment, overall, it's anything that doesn't seem like any new regulation and anything that can be presented as, in fact, deregulation. So we've got this plan for AI growth labs, which is going to be this cross-sectoral sandbox, which everyone's quite excited about, but there's a lot of concern at the moment about whether that will actually get through Parliament, because there are so many other concerns around AI copyright in the UK that there's this sense that everyone's just going to jump on this bill and it will just get dragged down as what they call a Christmas tree bill. So we've got this overall sense of anything to do with AI. So far the policy has generally been, we don't have the EU AI Act, but we're going to have some more ideas. But I don't know if anyone's following UK party politics, but AI has yet to become much of a party political issue. We've seen the Liberal Democrats, they've come out recently with their vision for AI, but so far it seems that there just aren't that many ideas. If you speak to MPs, they say that everyone's going along with what the government's proposed so far because no one else has any better ideas. So I think that sort of gives a bit of an idea as to the paucity of ideas at the moment. Just anything that can be pegged as being pro-economic growth is the main concern.
And I guess that really hits a dynamic that we're seeing in capitals around the world, which is that artificial intelligence really is a global challenge and a global issue, and then it's intersecting very deeply with local politics in every country. Oceane, France lays claim to the only European contender in the global AI race, and that is, of course, Mistral. I wondered how Paris is approaching that balance between regulation and competitiveness and how those dynamics are playing out in Paris right now.
Well, it's very interesting because, of course, having Mistral really shifts the discussion in France, even though other groupments of interest are also trying to push for more regulation of AI. I'm thinking of the cultural sector, for instance, with the power struggle in Parliament to regulate on copyrights and AI. So, of course, having Mistral is really weighting the discussion because some politicians are saying, of course, copyright is important, but at the same time, we cannot put it or champion in danger. Another topic of discussion around AI regulation that's really getting traction in France is deepfakes and also the manipulation of AI, also because even if it's early, all eyes are on the presidential election next year. So the use of AI to manipulate content is really something that's starting to be more and more relevant in the political discourse.
To a big election year, so yeah, very interesting there. Peter, you're covering obviously the very live discussions around the regulation of AI here in Brussels. I wonder if you could give us a sense of how that's playing out and I guess how you see the direction of travel on that.
I think what really shaped the discussions in Brussels the last few weeks was the reveal of the Anthropic's model Mythos that Anthropic didn't release to the wider audience because of cybersecurity fears. And I think that really changed the narrative, because before that, that model, the narrative was like, okay, Europe is lagging behind in the race. But I think the question is now rather, is Europe even a part of the race? Because we don't have access to this model, and there is no serious contender at the moment in Europe who has the same capabilities as the Mythos model. So that's really a question where you're like, okay, we're not a part of the race at all. And of course, we have several initiatives that are already on the table or coming that try to change this. We have the AI omnibus, a rollback of certain of the AI rules that the Commission only put in place like 2 years ago. And we have the tech sovereignty package coming, which will try to will try to reduce our reliance from Europe on US technology. But that was mainly focused on chips and cloud services. But now the question is also like, are we even sovereign on AI models? Do we have models that can really, where we have access? And because these models are now increasingly seen as a kind of a tool to also as an offensive or a defensive tool, it used to be just something that you could use to draft text, but now it's also possibly a hacking tool.
And you mentioned this rollback of AI rules in Brussels, and Larissa, I wanted to bring you in here because this is something that, you know, on the face of it, very technical, but something that has become very political in Berlin. Can you just talk us through that in the last days and weeks?
Yeah, so Germany has probably not made itself very popular last week with its position on the AI Act. But to me, this was not very surprising because Chancellor Friedrich Merz, he said 2 weeks ago at the Hannover Messe, which is a very big industry event, in front of big companies like Siemens, I am willing to fight this fight for you. And I think he has kept his promise. He is under enormous pressure. The economy in Germany is not doing well, and I don't think it will get all of a sudden better without AI regulation. But I think that for parts of Germany, the AI Act has almost become like a symbol for everything that is going wrong right now, like too much bureaucracy, too much uncertainty. And I feel like the German position is driven by a fear that if Europe is pushing for this AI Act, it gets even harder to adopt AI in the industry in sectors that are very important for Germany, where there's a lot of strength, and that is engineering and manufacturing.
And you mentioned that kind of balance, and Frank, I wanted to bring you back in. You mentioned just now that the sense in London has been, don't do what Brussels did. Can you talk us through that and then also potentially expand? I mean, Peter obviously mentioned Mythos, which has sort of changed the debate here in continental Europe. How are both those things playing out in London?
Well, there hasn't been that much direct mention from ministers about how wonderful it is to not be in the EU for all things AI. But that's been an underlying tone. There's been some mentions of having more of an eye to EU regulation last autumn around AI, and there's again been rumours more recently, so there's a bit of a panic amongst industry around what that means. And then on something like Mythos, that goes into a little bit of the UK's view on AI governance overall. Mythos was tested by the UK's AI Security Institute, which is a sort of jewel in the crown of its governance approach. And AC, this institute, seems to be on an ever higher pedestal. It's a sort of panacea which will solve any issue. And so for Mythos, I think there's a sort of quiet smugness in government that they've got this sort of first look at things, and then our banks are apparently having their own first look at that. This is all built into having the right sorts of tools in place for AI governance rather than hard regulation.
That's really interesting, and also, I mean, I guess you mentioned the UK has this institute, which is the crown jewel in London. I think it's also seen as something to aspire to in continental Europe. I mean, Peter also mentioned this debate around tech sovereignty that's playing out now. Larissa, I wondered if you could give us a sense of where that conversation is heading in Berlin. How are people viewing tech sovereignty? And I guess, you know, a fundamental question that we'll be asking today and going forward is, how are France and Germany kind of driving that debate in Brussels?
Yeah, so our German Minister for Digital Affairs, Carsten Wildberger, he almost highlights all the time that there are basically two dimensions of sovereignty. One is the offensive one, and the other is the defensive one. And the defensive one is about not being dependent and not being vulnerable. And the offensive one is about taking part in the growth and creating value. And what he always says is that sovereignty means having the freedom to choose our partners. It doesn't mean to have to do everything by ourselves. And that partners don't have to be necessarily in Europe. They have to be trustworthy, and we have to share the same values. And a very good example of that is Canada, for example. Just 1 week ago, Germany and Canada announced the merger of two of their AI startups, Cohere and Aleph Alpha. And I think the German position is more about, if we do not have the technology we need for it, we have to do it with partners, with trusted partners on our way to get there.
And Oceane, how does that land in Paris? How does that resonate with what you're hearing in Paris?
Yeah, well, the position of Paris is quite different, and it's also why it's hard to get like a common position with Germany, even if they said that they would reach a common definition of digital sovereignty in the months to come. But yeah, France thinks that if you want to be able to regulate and have a say in the discussion, you need to have companies that are competitive and can challenge the big American players. So that's a big focus, and it means that France will want to push its companies to, for instance, public procurements and get more public support for them.
And Peter, just to hand back to you as we close out this conversation, how do you see the sovereignty debate playing out, and what are the questions you'd like us to tackle in the coming days on stage here?
I mean, what Brussels is really watching in the tech sovereignty debate, or what it is at least keeping in mind, is the pressure from the US also on this. We've seen, of course, in the past year that the ties between the EU and the US are very strained. We've seen that on the content moderation and the free speech side. But lately, they've been changing tone a bit, and they've been really focusing on the EU's sovereignty push. And they've been warning like, hey, it's fine to go for sovereignty, but don't close the door for our companies, or don't restrict the access that our companies have to your market. And we've seen that, for example, in recent interviews that Andrew Puzder, the US ambassador to the EU, has given. He already warned about not restricting too much. And I think the Commission is keeping that in mind. We've seen, for example, Executive Vice President Hanna Virkunen already saying, like, this won't be a protectionist measure. And of course, when the package is out, still tentatively end of May, everyone will be watching to what extent is this going to put certain US companies at a disadvantage or not. And that's very much top of mind here in Brussels.
Thank you. And hopefully that gives us a flavor of some of the discussions we'll be getting into. And yeah, look forward to continuing the conversations both on this stage and in our networking breaks. Thank you all very much. And up next, we will be leaving the floor to our partner Visa, who are sitting down for an executive interview with my colleague Mathieu Wofel after a quick stage change. Thank you very much.